Hi, I'm RC Jim, and this is the second video on the building of our SBD Dauntless dive bomber. Today we go through the wing and get all the dive flaps configured and all that kind of thing. Of course, the retracts finished off, and so this is where we get to at the end. But I tell you, boy, we had some issues along the way. I broke a couple of things, had to fix them, and oh, you know, yeah, you've been there, haven't you? So have a watch and see just what it is that we had to battle with and how it is that we overcame it all to be able to come up with a good result. In our last video, we showed you how we set up the landing gear, had it all ready to go. We've now got it installed in there, and so yes, it does do a good job going up and down. Locks into place and all of that type of thing. So that's good. In terms of challenges in finalizing that, one of the big things had to do with locating the screws in the bottom. So, or the top of the wing, whatever, to screw in to fasten the servo in place. I decided I didn't want to glue that because I want it to be accessible to get it out and work on it and that type of thing. So we just put the screws in there, and as far as getting the screws in, we had to get them into that plate. So we've got the plate in there that's sort of holding it in place and constraining it on both sides and the back, and then on the top it's constrained on one side. So we had to locate where to get the screws to get them into these pieces of timber that the servo is fastened into. And I wanted to go right through that, not just into that. So I measured out and did my best to locate it. Then I used a extremely tiny drill bit to drill in there, and I use a broken off one because that broke that one off in there. But actually this little one here. So I used one of these little tiny drill bits to drill in there to where it wasn't a perceptible hole, and you could see where it comes. You could use a pin, but that's reasonably thick balsa sheet that they've got on there. I assume it's balsa. I'm not sure what kind of wood it is, but it's reasonably thick. So anyway, I used the drill, saw where it came out, and then it wasn't exactly right, so I measured from where it came out which directions it needed to go to get where I wanted it. Then altered that accordingly. On this side here I had a piece of masking tape over that, and so I plotted where it needed to go, and then I drilled the one hole. I guess I started with this one here. I drilled that one, and I had measured the distance between the two posts coming up, and so I measured back for this one, got it straight in line, and then put that one in there. So that got that all set up. We've put a hole in this side here to be able to bring the servo leads up through. And so we've got that all set. We then mounted a servo in here for the flaps, and that's the dive flap that comes up. And decided not to go too extreme on that, so basically that'll be the level of deflection that we can get, and of course we can make it less than that if we want, and get it to where it's firmly shut when the servo is down that way. So now I'm getting ready to do this one over here. I'll be doing the same sort of thing. And by the way, what I've done is on these pieces of plywood that I've put in here, again, we've got a thick and a narrow piece on this side and a narrow piece on that side, but I've actually epoxied them down so that they can be part of the structure to help hold it in there. Again, we've opened out the opening to match where the wheel is coming. I've glued that down use clamps around it to hold it down, and then tape on this side to hold that down. That's going to clear where it needs to fit onto the fuselage, so that's all good. We got our little platform here, so we're getting ready to locate the screws, get that in, and to screw the this part in place. As we do that, we will use the straight edge going across to make sure that it's going straight, and that should take care of it. Okay, retracts are all installed. So they go up like so, lock into place, and lock into place. Yeah, did the same thing on this one as on the other one in terms of locating the screws and all of that type of thing. We've now put on these little plates onto here, and what I've done is, because I already had the remnants of the previous model, which had the fixed gear, I had an extra set of these little saddle things, the little plastic saddles. So I've used the 2 from the new kit along with 2 from the old one to use those there to hold these side bits on. Of course, these side bits were just simply cut out of the cover, so they came with this on the end of it, and just cut that off. And that's basically the way the SBD actually was. It just had that little bit of cover thing there. So that's all done. That's all taken care of. Very important that we check hinges, and these are all glued in. I don't see any movement anywhere, so that's all fine. The travel on the servos will have to be limited a bit, just to avoid hitting the ends of the stops, and so we'll have to adjust that carefully when the time comes. But that'll be pretty simple and straightforward to do that. So, quite pleased with the outcome of the center section of the wing. Next, on the in the instructions, they want you joining on the wing. But I got started on the servo installation simply because I was waiting for glue to dry. Now, there's a few issues with regard to this here. Of course, this is the right-hand wing, so the first thing I did before I did anything is I put RF up there for the front of the wing and the right-hand wing to make sure I knew exactly how that needed to go. Second thing is we cut the little hole. You know, it already had a hole in the plywood back there, so cut the hole in the covering there, and that's used to be able to adjust this little guy here when we're working on getting those dive flaps adjusted. The wire was way long, so I cut that a little bit shorter to where we can get up and get at it. But there's a caution here that I'd like to alert you to. They're showing the left wing here, so let's get the left wing up here. And they're showing the little panel thing there. If you look at this, it doesn't match. Okay, if you notice on the panel, if they got the hole up in that corner, they got the servo mounted across this way. With these two things being there instead of being there. Now, in actual fact, it's built correctly. This picture is wrong. So, again, if we get on the servo there and we line everything up, you can see it's got the servo lined up perpendicular to the wing. So, that's how it ought to be. The plane is correct, but the picture is drawn wrong. So, that can be a little bit confusing. Now, as you go to put this thing together, it's quite tricky. They've already given you these two wooden posts here. Mine were a little bit narrow, so I ran it through the radial arm saw to just slim down one of those just a very tiny bit to make my servo fit. I also note that I've got these sort of I don't know what you want to call it. This is a high-tech HS 225BB. which is a little bit smaller than your standard servo. Standard servo, here's a high-tech HS311, standard size, and you can see that it's way bigger. So in the instructions, they say you need, a certain number of standard servos. Well, those can't be standard. Standard servos would kind of fit out here. With a wire out of the way, that would fit out there. So for the ailerons, you could fit standard servos. I'm going to use these smaller ones again, but nonetheless, these in particular are not standard size servos. Next thing to note with regard to this is that, of course, you get the little fitting attached on there. I had a look to see how much travel I needed, and I didn't need the full travel from the outside, so I've moved that in a bit. Okay, so now we want to get this guy put together here, and all of this will get readjusted later on. We don't even have the hinges glued in yet, but I just kind of like it's kind of like a trial fit, just trying to make sure that things are basically going to be okay. So we've got our little wire here. We've shortened it up to where we can get at it okay. There's this lead that's going to get routed through there. We'll just make sure it's underneath the wire for now. So we've got to thread this wire onto our little collar here. As you note, we're not out on the very end. We don't need that much travel. And just check my rotation there. I put some thread locker on that, and I just want to make sure that this thing rotates freely. Okay, so we've got that rotates freely. I got the hole clear through there. So this collar is loose. We get the control rod onto the little attaching thing. Okay, and now what we do is we get that bottom flap up to just a little bit beyond halfway, so it'll have some tension on it. And we'll get something to just help hold it there. And just something that we can use to, we'll lift up and just use that to hold it where we want it to be held. We'll get our Allen key onto the little grub screw. Get that to where it's close to, okay, that's snug, so just take it off a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to get this panel roughly where it's going to be. Get that bottom dive flap just a little bit above where I want it to be. And I snug up on that. So anyway, what we then do is get the top one, well, the one on this side, down where we want it, and tighten up the collar, and that basically holds them there. So there'll be a fair amount of playing around with that to get those right, and that amount of slop in there I don't particularly like. But what we'll want to do is keep them pinched together, so it's got, the slop is taken out of it by them being pushed together tighter. And we can't really worry about that too much until we get the hinges glued in place. Okay, so that was a bit of an advance on that. Okay, we're now gluing together the wing. We've applied the epoxy on the pieces of plywood, put them in there, and on the dowels, made sure the dowels are sticking into both bits, which is a challenge. I see that there's a potential that the things up here might not be in line, so we'll make sure that happens. You can see we've got a bungee cord to help hold the thing together, and I've played around with different tensions to try and hold together straight, and it's got gaps here regardless, so it's tight there and it's tight up here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is put some light clamps here and here to make sure that that stays straight, and I'll do the same on the other sides just to make sure it stays even between the two pieces here and there. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the clamps on here to get these surfaces even. The last plane that I had that I bought from somebody else, when it was glued together, they weren't quite the same. So I've made sure that those are equal. Of course, when we put the epoxy and everything in there, we made sure that the things went together. We epoxied the bits into the center section first, and let it dry or cure for about a half an hour or so, and then we put in the other. With the epoxy that we use, it doesn't actually cure in 30 minutes, so it just sort of was very, very heavy and thick and whatever, but it helped hold, and particularly the pegs in the back. It's very easy for those to get pushed all the way in, so it helped hold them in place as we positioned the others. I did put marks on them, and as we put it together, I also put the blade down on them to try and hold it in place to make sure that it went into the other side as well. Okay, so then dehedral, this wing was a little bit lower than the other. These clamps are the same, so it's got it level here in the middle, pretty much. We hope. Yeah, about 55 for both. So anyway, then I counted out 7 of these marks out here and measured up and got about 88. This one was less, so I've propped it up a little bit on that end to get it up to the 88, making sure that this is still down on the ground here. We've cleaned it up underneath. I've got some baking paper there to keep the rope from getting stuck onto it should some epoxy drip out the bottom. We did clean it up, but it's possible that we can get some drips down there. If so, we will very carefully use a flat-bladed knife such as that to cut it off. And then, of course, it's got some rubber, round rubber stuff that's intended to go into those joints. So, that's looking good. Our wing is now all together, but I notice we've got a problem here, Houston. On these hinges, you know, they haven't glued them in yet, but they've been painted. That's paint, the same paint that, you know, well, the paint that's on this, and that reddish that's under there, that's a bit of that red paint there. So maybe that would stick okay, but I'm going to clean off that paint before I glue these things in. I think they're glued into the control surface, but not into the plane. Yeah, a bit strange as to what's going on there, why that has that sticking out from the cut, so we'll clean that up a bit as well. Yeah, again, I'm sensitive to this because it was a failure of these hinges that caused my previous crash, the hinges on this die flap. So I want to make sure those are right. The ailerons have been glued in. I can pull on those and nothing is happening. And they actually look like a CA type hinge rather than the pinned hinge. Notice as well that these pins are the loose type pins, so you want to make sure that the pins are in all of the way. So these things will pull out. So make sure those are in. And of course, when we glue these, we'll want to make sure that we've got adequate clearance. That was another issue in the previous plane, the way it was put together. It didn't have adequate clearance out here to the aileron. And with this one, it seems that on one of these, I think it's this hinge here, it really wanted to be a little bit more that way. But anyway, we'll take some sandpaper and clean up these hinges, and then we can glue them in. Well, I've just had one of those major glitches that you wish would never happen, and you kick yourself. I busted off the little nylon control link here, such as that. What I was trying to do is I was trying to hook it back onto the control rod here. And what I should have done is just simply removed the control rod and threaded it to where I could do it carefully. But I'm trying to get it in here like this, and I'm twisting it around. And with all that leverage on there, and it not being in the quite right spot, it snapped it off. Now, maybe that is a little bit more brittle than what it ought to be, but primarily it was my fault for doing it that way. Should have had the wire. Stuck the wire in there, threaded it through carefully, and then put it back in. So what we're going to do is we're going to grind out that bit there, and I think I'll make a little bit out of aluminium to go in there to replace that. And we'll match it with this one in terms of how far out it is, and boy, I sure wished I hadn't done that. Live and learn. Okay, the epoxy is now set. So we use this to make sure that the surfaces were in all the way. And yes, they move. And with these arms, you got to be careful. They'll dig into the stuff on the inside, but that's all good there. And over here on this side, yes, they move. Get these things out of the way again. Yeah, so that's all fine. That's all fine. Okay, yeah, so that's all good. Now, we need to rig up these guys here. And so that's a next thing along the way is to set up the linkages. We're on page 9B of the instructions. Okay, so this one is right front, so yes, that's the one that goes there. A collar, where's our collar? I set the collar down somewhere. There it is. Okay, the collar goes over the two control wires. Okay. And for right now, we'll just have it roughly where it's going to be. If you can estimate how deep that is and then have the things there, hold these things together, and let's say we line it up with that, and how far over is it going to be? Someplace in there. So I'm just lightly hooking that on to get it somewhere close. Now this guy, we've got to get it onto that rod there. So we hold her up and look for the hole. Okay, get it in the hole. Now here's where you got to have a bit of guesswork. Let's see. Okay, we want the servo forward, so let's get our servo checker. Okay, for the servo, we do want it to be in the position farthest away from the flaps, which will be the closed position. And when they open up, that pulls that in. That thing pulls that way when they open up. So what I want to do is put my servo tester on here, powered up. We get it into the servo mode, and I'm just going to put it someplace close to the middle for the start. Generally good practice. Not that it's a big deal here, and that this isn't fastened in yet. Okay. Now I'm moving that all the way that way. Okay. So we'll get our Allen key on there. The Allen key is on there. We loosen it up a bit. This is going to change as it goes up and down and in and out and all kinds of stuff. Okay. Tell you what I'm going to do for a start. I'm going to disconnect, loosen up that collar that connects the collar that connects the two together, to give that flexibility to go whichever way it wants to go. And that's going to be close to that right there. And I'm going to just bring it a tiny bit towards me. And then I'd like a little bit of tension on that. Which one is that? Okay, so it is the bottom one. So I'll lay a little bit more towards me. And when I say towards me, let's just use a little something here to help hold this guy where we want it. That's a little bit too much. It's going to be close. So if I got the other one with just a little bit of pressure on it, I'd like to have them have a little bit of tension to hold them together. So that's going to be pretty close. What I might do for now is actually route the cable through here. Eventually we'll route it where it belongs, but just to have it out of the way. Okay. So the next thing is to get that with a little bit of pressure on the other direction, and then tighten up the collar that attaches the two wires together. And what did I do? Loosen that one up? Don't know how that happened. Oh. Let's plug this in, see if that was anything. Okay. I've seen a lot of these that they fly them like that. Reminds me of America's Cup, or not America's Cup. Oh yeah, I think the America's Cup sails do that, or maybe Sail GP. Okay, that looks like that's just a little bit too tight. But boy, that's close. Okay. So as you look at that there, can't do much what happens on the outside, but the control horns are right here. So you'd certainly want those to be tight, and that is mighty good. Okay, so yeah, that's got pressure on it. So I'll just snug this one up a bit more. Okay, and then I'm going to put these screws in. I'll just do 2 of them for the moment because we're going to have to route the cable. But let's just see what we got here. Get this thing up in the air. Okay, we'll clearly want to limit the travel, but yeah. Okay, very good. And we do the same now for the other side. Well, we've got another little issue here. Our flaps are all working good, and you note that there's a difference in the position of these 2 arms, which makes sense. This is the new one that we've made out of the aluminium and gotten in there. But as we bring her together here, this is the one that's attached to the aluminium, and that's quite flexible, not a problem. It can go well over one way or the other. And as you look at, where this thing is going to set, it's quite comfortable to be in the realm of where the arm is going to be. But this one, because of the way that it's attached on there, the wire goes in from this side through the little nylon horn and back that way. So when you go to push it this way, it's binding up on the end of that. So as we look at it here, free and easy movement up to there, but starting right here is where it starts to bind, and that's before we get to the point where the arm is. It's about, you can't see that too well, but that's about 5 mil short. We could get by with it just like that, but I'm thinking that I'd rather not have things binding, and so I'd like to straighten that out a bit if I can, and hopefully do it without breaking off the nylon bit on this thing. I'm done having to do that, especially given that I've got the servos in place. So that's this bottom one. I want to support that a little bit. Okay. So I'm getting a hold of the wire here. I'm going to have to bend it far. And I don't need to put torque on the thing. I just need to get it over a little bit. Okay, that's better. Okay. So that's pretty well where it's now coming to, is roughly where that thing is. And let's just see travel-wise. It really has to pull on that pretty hard. Oh, what will we do? Needless to say, I'm not a happy camper right now. As you think about it, the moment arm, the leverage that you have between the line of these hinges and where that's pulling on, you're talking about just, I don't know, what is that? From there to there, 5 millimeters, something like that. Now this is reasonably easy to push up and down, but when you got that little 5 millimeters, you think about the amount of force that goes on that, it's quite a bit, And unfortunately, I'm afraid that nylon isn't terribly good stuff. So we're going to have to do the same thing as we did there. Fortunately, we can get at this. So I'm going to grind that out. I'm going to make another piece of aluminum, put it in there, and this side is going to be good. And we'll see what happens with the other side as time goes on. But boy, that is frustrating. You know, I was just simply pulling on it, pulling straight. I wasn't twisting on it one way or the other, just giving it a straight pull and rip that thing right off of there. Well, it has been a challenge to say the least, but hey, we got our wing finally together. We've got the dive flaps all in there. This one I'm going to tighten up a little bit more, but I didn't want to go too tight until it's had a chance for the epoxy to harden up a little bit more. And similarly, that's not down all the way. So that's yet to be done. But we got our retracts in place. We got the gear doors on there, the covers on that. We got our flaps, dive brake for the middle. Servos for the ailerons all hooked up. There'll be a patch that goes over this hole for flying. We'll use some of that material that they gave us, but we'll do that at the very end. So, quite pleased with that, even though I was not pleased with some of the things that happened along the way. So, we're all set now to next get into the fuselage and install a motor and all of that, and should be good. Well, thank you for watching. We will continue with this build, so make sure that you subscribed so that you have that handy for when that comes up. And then, of course, in the meantime, have a look at some other videos on the site. You have a great day, enjoy your flying and your building.